the American Society of Magical Negroes. That's a movie that opened this weekend.
Yeah, I saw the trailer. Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, David Allen Greer, who's one of the leads in this, who's actually really funny, if you remember him from In Living Color. He's actually a really good comedic actor, but you can only make so much of a script like this.
Watching you walk through a room full of white people was the most painful thing I've ever seen.
Excuse me. Sorry.
I want to take you to a job interview.
There's a recruiting class starting right now, and we got to get you in it.
Welcome to the American Society of Magical Negroes.
I don't really understand.
It's easier to say.
What's the most dangerous animal on the planet?
Shark.
White people, when they feel uncomfortable. White people feeling uncomfortable precedes a lot of bad stuff for us. That's why we fight white discomfort every day. Because the happier they are, the safer we are.
The name needs a little updating, maybe like magical black people, or I guess that doesn't have the same ring.
You ready?
Oh, wow.
Your first client is a Jason Munn.
The movie made just $1 million opening weekend in the entire United States. It made 310 grand on Sunday, which was a 34% collapse from just Friday. Not much market for it. By contrast, this film I've mentioned before on the show, I'm sure people have seen it or certainly heard about it. American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright, who's really a good actor, and he was great in this. That was sort of a surprise hit, and American Fiction really is satirical in the direction of performative, whatever white liberals think black culture is. Wright plays this intellectual, this academic, who is an author, and his books don't really sell very well. And then he sees the race hustling books, where you talk in street vernacular or write in street vernacular, selling very well. And so his literary agent convinces him to go down that path. He actually writes a spoof of that is taken literally by a publisher, and then he becomes this massive success. And as he says at one point, there's some great lines in that film that's well written as compared to this American Society of Magical Negroes. He says at one point, the dumber I get, the richer I get. Or the dumber I act, the richer I get, which is also a cultural commentary. But it's just interesting. I mean, it's interesting that American Fiction would be made in Hollywood and could get the star power of a Jeffrey Wright. And it's amazing, or perhaps it's amazing is overstated. Perhaps it's telling, perhaps, that what you would expect from Hollywood, the most dangerous animal on the planet is the white person who feels uncomfortable or awkward or is suffering from low self-esteem because that's bad for black people. That's sort of the premise. You would think that would be what sells based on what we're told from these same cultural mavens about the state of race relations. So I just think it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreading it, but sometimes, what people consume culturally is indicative of where their heads are at culturally. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Star Parker. She's the president and founder of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education and host of CURE. That's the Center for Urban and Renewal and Education, CURE. Host of CURE America on NRB TV and TCTV. She's also the editor of the just-released The State of Black Progress, Confronting Government and Judicial Obstacles, and a contributor to the soon-to-be-released The State of Black America, Progress, Pitfalls, and the Promise of the Republic, which is edited by our friend Professor William Allen of Michigan State fame, as well as the lead author of the Black History curriculum that has been implemented in the state of Florida. Anyway, all right, that's a lot there. Star Parker, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're so very welcome. And those movies are a reminder of why I don't go to movies, and mostly because I work here in Washington, D.C., so there's enough drama going on that are trying to fool the American people into unhappiness because they want to take control of their lives. But secondly, it encourages me to continue our work here at CURE, because an alternative voice must be available for the American people when we think about matters of culture, race, relations, and poverty.
So when you know, the State of Black Progress, you're the editor of this just released book, Confronting Governmental and Judicial Obstacles. So which are the major governmental/judicial obstacles facing Black Americans?
Well, first of all, let's back up a minute, because you mentioned the first tome that we brought out 2 years ago. What CURE is basically is an alternative to the National Urban League and the antithesis of BLM, Black Lives Matters, because they have been promoting that narrative that you just articulated well about Black life in America and this intrinsic now disdain for the founders and people of white or Caucasian heritage. So we have to have that alternative voice. So a couple of years ago, a donor underwrote us putting out the State of Black America, which is about the pitfalls and the promises, historical look, academic look, the one that Dr. Allen edited for us. At that moment, he was the COO of CURE and the long-term board member of our organization, CURE Policy. Well, the Urban League came after us immediately with their lawyers to say we needed to change the name, cease and desist, because they had trademarked the State of Black America, which their narrative is constantly from the 60s that there's something inherently wrong in the founding, and therefore we need to transform the country. So we did change the name, as you're pointing out now, to the new one that's coming out 1 month from now, called the State of Black Progress. And what we're doing this time is looking at the judicial changes in the country to actually move blacks toward freedom. And then we address what next needs to be done. The authors of the essays, we call it a tome because it is a compilation of essays from major scholars on particular areas of public thought. And Dr. Allen is one of the editors on or contributors on the part about the judicial changes, as well as Judge Janice Rogers Brown. And after they make their assessments, we then move into different policy discussions to where we should still be concerned. You know, you think about you guys there in Chicago. You hear Chicago, everyone thinks everything in Chicago is broken, whereas we know that everything in Chicago is not broken, but there are pockets of concern. In fact, when Donald Trump was in the presidency, we worked closely with him to identify where those pockets are, and out of the 45,000 zip codes in the country, 8,700 are broken. That's a lot. 20% is a lot, but at least we can focus on them. And so that's what we look at through the rest of the State of Black Progress, is what should we be thinking about in these areas that keep bubbling up in flames year after year. What have we done wrong as a society that people will not mainstream, and what should we be thinking about? And in this particular tome, we're looking at health issues, housing issues, education issues, and economic stability. What do we need to do to help people get out of the rut of paycheck to paycheck and actually start having an investment in their country?
Well, so these broken neighborhoods, I mean, I think we all understand, you sort of by inference suggested what brokenness means. So then what are the fixes if government isn't the main fixer? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Right. The war on poverty has been a total disaster failure, and government is the problem, not the solution, as Ronald Reagan told us way back then in the 80s. Well, now we can see, fast forward to today, that government is still the problem. When you think about the answers, as you're getting to, it's to remove governmental barriers over these areas in people's lives that they should control themselves, whether it's housing, whether it's health, whether it's education, or whether it's what we argue in this particular tome is about freedom from Social Security, to allow people to put their monies into the market so that they can maintain a healthy portfolio to transfer to their children and or have a healthy retirement. So what we've done wrong as a society is continued this war on poverty for too long. It should have never started in the 60s. what we've done as a result is we've trapped people in certain zip codes to where everything in those zip codes is broken, from family life to educational life. Government controls all their interests, and all of their politicians are corrupted. They're singing the same song because they're social justice warriors who really don't like America. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we need to do to fix these problems in these broken zip codes is remove governmental barriers, dismantle the welfare state.
And for those not familiar with your story, I think we've had you on before, and we've mentioned that, but it bears repeating. I mean, you're a success story that can be modeled too. So you've walked in the shoes that many who are in these broken communities have walked in, and came out better for it.
You're absolutely right, and I'm glad that you brought up my personal story, because it is an example of what happens when an individual decides that they want to take care of their own lives. I bought the lie of the left that most that are trapped in these zip codes have bought, and now their lives are still in despair. My problems were somebody else's fault. That I was poor because others were wealthy. That America's so racist I should not mainstream. And in listening to these lies over and over again without an alternative, it's why I built an alternative, you really can buy into unfairness in my life. Too bad, I'm just going to let it unravel. And mine did unravel, as many in these zip codes are unraveling. Criminal activity, drug activity, sexual activity. I was in and out of abortion clinic after clinic, and then landed on welfare. And it wasn't until a Christian conversion that I was able to change my life, pull it together, become responsible with my choices, finish school, get a degree, and start a business. And that business, when it was destroyed in the 92 Los Angeles riots, the Rodney King riots, the same thing we're dealing with still again today, transitioned me into the work in public policy to say, I'm going to Washington and try to remove these barriers so that people will begin to take control of their own lives and be able to have some dignity, some personal responsibility, and be able to live free.
And do you think that message is gaining resonance, or is it waning in relevance?
Well, that's a fascinating question, because after I consulted on federal welfare reform in the 90s, and after we did that, we started seeing poverty rates drop because work was increased. And so people do buy ideas when given the opportunity, if you will. When we've been promoting for 30 years school choice, now it's the black community, the poorest of moms, that want that for their children, to money to follow their children to schools that they want. The challenge is the social justice warriors keep standing in the way. When the nation was on fire because of George Floyd and his death, we actually ran billboards in those hard zip codes, including those zip codes up there where George Floyd lost his life, that were very simple in these communities. The success sequence: you really want to get tired of poverty, then finish school, take any job, get married, save and invest, and give back to your community. And Black Lives Matter demanded from the billboard company that they take those boards down. Wow. They told them to breach their contract with me, or if you don't take them down, we're going to burn them down, was their message. And the billboard company then took them down and sent their money back. So to answer, it's a long answer to your short question, that yes, can people live free? I believe they can. Now, will they all be equal in how they live? Of course not. But the capacity to live free and to make personal responsibilities is a gift from God for every individual. But what we've done is allowed for government and demagogues to get in the way of people to make decisions for their own lives. We trapped them in housing projects. We trapped them in failing schools. We trapped them in a broken Social Security retirement system. We trapped them in government health care, and therefore they're not being successful in their lives. And when people are under pressure and they don't think they have anything to live for, the blood runs in the streets, the blood of abortion and the blood of these young men who just keep shooting at each other.
Wow. And now with this presidential election year, do you think more black voters are leaning towards Trump than the last time around? And if so, why?
All of the polling is showing it. Well, I think what's happened is people actually could have a contrast now. I mean, when you ask was life better under Donald Trump, the answer is yes, including the black community. We saw after he signed the tax bill into federal law, we saw for the first time in the history of the country, more African Americans make over $75,000 a year than under $25,000 a year. We saw poverty drop almost in half. And what we also saw was with the Opportunity Zone initiative that was in that tax bill, activity beginning in those broken zip codes that we talked about earlier. So these are the things that we are discussing in the State of Black Progress, because the liars on the left continue with that narrative, have gotten away with it too long, and it's about time that most Americans have opportunity to see the other side of the story. Because if we don't, then we are going to end up in racial conflict. Most Americans now have interracial relationships, whether it's through their work, whether it's in their neighborhood, whether it's just their kids playing together. So we cannot afford to buy a lie that we're still in the 50s when it comes to race relationships. They're getting worse because the left keeps insisting that this country is racist. You just played some, I cannot believe those movies. Well, I'm glad you said the one is failing, though, because it's like, really?
Right.
Go again?
Right.
Really? This is that's not where we should be in the 21st century.
Well, I wonder something too. I recently did an interview with Coleman Hughes about his new book, The End of Racism, and one of the points that he makes too is that, and I think you're making it in part, race relations were improving over the last 30 years into the 2010s. They started to flatline, and by race relations, I mean whites thinking about blacks, blacks thinking about whites, not really thinking about race, and as you say, sort of being in community with one another because of the integrated nature of our society, and that's what we all want. I used to think, and now I find that some people don't want that apparently. But what Coleman Hughes says, too, is around the same time of the Obama years, particularly the second term where it was a little bit more racially charged, you had the advent of the smartphones. And so now you have, we talk about screen time and kids and social media, but one of the under-discussed aspects of this is incendiary incidents where a cop mistreats a black citizen. They move at the speed of social media and the speed of the internet, and now now you're getting whipped into a frenzy, and you have people then seize on that and say, look, the police are a systemically racist institution. Look at this video. Look at what happened over here. And then, you know what kind of conversations happen online. Oftentimes they're not exactly highbrow. And so that fed a lot of the deterioration in race relations over the last decade, even though prior to that, despite prior to that things improving, that it was social media as sort of a tinderbox for those who profit from racial division.
Well, that's true. I mean, there are instances, and they are broadened by the internet, where you can pull on emotionally charged issues and then create a groundswell. We saw that, especially with BLM hitting the national scene and raising that type of money and shaking down the major corporations that they did. But when you think about police reform, we never got to the real discussion. What the real discussion was that Tim Scott, this great senator from South Carolina, discovered is union control. When you think about what happens in unionized police forces, the poor communities get the rookies and the rebels. This man that killed George Floyd, Chauvin, I think his name was, had been under suspicion for quite some time. Let's just put it that way. When we look into what happened with Michael Brown, what was that young rookie doing in that community alone? A community that everything was broken, and you got big, angry men. So union was a discussion that we should have had. But you're exactly right. When you can send it around the world real quickly that this is all policing, then immediately you're in a whole new discussion to never really get down to the bottom line. And one of the challenges that we ran into and keep running into, especially with the progressive left that are heavily invested in social justice movement of Marxism, is that then they want to nationalize all the discussions. So what happened then was you go to the federal government, do something, and nothing was done because it's not their role to do. But you're absolutely right. When you fuel this type of frustration and people begin to get very angry, it's hard then to have relationships, in a broader sense. But what doesn't break down is the relationships one-on-one. When you think about the children of the baby boomer, that Gen Xer, they didn't leave their relationships that they have that are interracial. They just became more social justice warriors because they think that they're solving a problem that really didn't exist. The perception of racism is an industry in and of itself. And we saw that when you had even B of A doling out $1 billion to try to make it go away.
Star Parker is the president and founder of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, CURE, host of Cure America on NRB TV and TCT TV, and contributor to the soon-to-be-released The State of Black America, Progress, Pitfalls, and the Promise of the Republic, which comes out May 24th, but you can pre-order it all the usual places. Star Parker, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome, and that's the State of Black Progress that will come out. We have a cease and desist against using the word America.
Oh, sorry. State of Black Progress. State of Black Progress.
Yeah, I don't want to fight them.
Sorry, I don't want to cause any litigation. State of Black Progress confronting governmental and judicial obstacles. Very good. Thanks so much, Star. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Yes, what a lovely conversation. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
The New York Times realizes what the data says about the impact of school closures. We'll start there with Jeffrey Tucker at 8:38.
That's a good one. But now let's head into the newsroom.